Welcome to Parenting GPS, navigating your parenting journey. I'm Kari Kling, the host of your show. Today is a huge treat for me because I have the opportunity to interview one of my heroes. And if you don't know about this person, he will be one of your heroes by the time we're finished with this episode, I'm sure. You know, we know so much more about the brain and about learning and about how we learn than we ever have before. But there was someone who was really at the forefront about this for the last 30 years. And I'd like to introduce him to you now. Dr. Thomas Armstrong is my guest today. Thomas Armstrong, PhD, is the executive director of the American Institute for Learning and Human Development, an award-winning author and speaker who has been an educator for nearly 50 years. He has over 1.4 million copies of his books in print in English on issues related to learning and human development, including 7 Kinds of Smart. I have them all over here. 7 Kinds of Smart in Their Own Way, Multiple Intelligences in the Classroom, and The Myth of the ADHD Child. His books are also available in over 100 foreign editions in 30 languages, including Spanish, Chinese, Hebrew, Danish, Russian, and Greek. Dr. Armstrong, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kari. It's so nice to be on.
Oh, it's my pleasure and my honor, truly. I told you before we started recruiting that if I sound like I'm your groupie, it's because I am. So what I'd like to do today is try to begin by asking you to explain to the people out there who may be watching what are the multiple intelligences. And let me just share this. This stemmed from the research of Dr. Howard Gardner from Harvard University 40 years ago. And you really are the one that took this research and took this information and created strategies and resources and ways that parents could take it and implement it right away.
Right. Yeah. Well, Dr. Gardner started out with the thought that IQ is not a good measure of intelligence. It's too limited to only 1 or 2 of the intelligences. And through a whole interdisciplinary process that involved neurology and symbol systems and anthropology and so on, he came up with a list of originally 7 intelligences. And then a few years back, he added an 8th. And so these 8 intelligences represent, according to Gardner, a broader way of accounting for human potential. He suggested intelligence really is the ability to solve problems and to create products. And so if your car breaks down on the highway, that's a problem to solve. And why don't we talk about the ability to fix engines as intelligent behavior, or the ability to write a symphony, or the ability to work well in a group, to manage a group or a large organization. So he really opened up the possibilities. And for schools, this was a real benefit, because schools have for so long been only teaching mainly in 2, maybe a fraction of the third intelligence. And so his model offers the possibility of reaching more kids who learn in these different ways.
And it's such an enormous concept for people to really understand, because you and I started as special ed teachers, and
Right.
the idea that if a child wasn't doing well in school, that there must be something wrong with the child. And we're going to get to
Right.
that by the end of the show. But
Sure.
to begin, there are so many viewers that I have, Dr. Armstrong, that are younger moms. They don't know about this, younger dads. And so I'd like to just start at the beginning, if I may, with just a brief overview.
Sure.
Starting with the verbal linguistic intelligence, could you share just what is it? How do we use it? How do kids use it? Anything that you'd like to say about that? And we'll just go down the list.
Sure. And I should add that I've sort of adapted Gardner's terms to be more direct. So instead of verbal linguistic intelligence, I call it word smart, because it says it all. Word smart obviously is being smart with words, and that could be in a variety of ways. You could be word smart as a speaker, as a writer, as a reader, the bookworm and so forth. And you could be book smart or word smart as a trivial pursuit expert, or as an orator, someone who could give great speeches. And so there's just a lot. I think it's important for people to understand that each of these intelligences within it has tremendous diversity. Each one is like an ecosystem. And so that's probably the intelligence that the schools focus the most attention on: reading, writing. Even a part of arithmetic is word smart when we ask kids to memorize the times tables, for example. And
Mm-hmm.
the second one, the second kind of smart is also emphasized by the schools. That's what I call number or logic smart. And as the term implies, it's the ability to work well with numbers, mathematics, as well as with logic. And so, this involves science, the scientific method, the creation of hypotheses, and the ability to solve logical problems. In this case, it may be math problems, it may be algebra problems, it may be physics problems. And this along with word smart are the two intelligences that the schools really value the most.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're good at those two intelligences, you're in good shape for the most part, unless the school is going too slow for you, in which case you might be frustrated as a learner, who knows all this stuff already. So
Exactly.
those are the two predominant intelligences in our schools. But then there's six others that tend not to be focused on, and that's the real tragedy of education. The third that I would mention is picture smart. This is one that's interested me a lot. It's the ability to visualize, the ability to orient yourself in space, the ability to draw or paint or work in sculpture or be a graphic artist or be an architect. And I've been really interested in this intelligence because there are a lot of kids out there who are really good at this, who end up with a label like dyslexic or learning disabled because they have trouble with decoding words, let's say. But if you ask them to draw a picture of an idea, they'll just come up with a great idea. The problem is we don't ask them to draw that picture because we don't value it in the schools. And so I really make an emphasis in a lot of my presentations on how we need to bring more picture learning into the schools, more books that are illustrated, more asking the kids to close their eyes and picture what they've read, more art, just more artistic opportunities in the schools. Usually if there's a budget problem, the arts are the first to be eliminated, and that's exactly what picture smart kids need in order to
Right.
feel successful and in order to feel good about themselves, that
Right.
somebody sees who they are. So that's
Dr. Armstrong, I want to just throw something in there if I may,
sure.
because you reminded me, you know, sometimes kids don't do well with the logic smart, but as you said, they're strong in the picture smart. And so it's about using their strength to access the area that's not as developed. And so you mentioned about math problems, story problems are the things that most children have the most trouble with. And I used to say to my students, draw it out. Draw
Right.
a picture of what they're asking so
Yep.
they can use their picture smart to help them be better at the number smart.
That's a terrific illustration. Thank you for adding that,
Thank you.
Kari.
I just wanted to share that. You
Yeah.
reminded me of it. So let's keep going. So we have,
Sure.
you've talked about the word smart, the logic or number smart, the picture smart.
The next one is body smart, and that's the ability to manipulate objects with your hands or to make things, construct things. It's the ability to move your body skillfully. So it could be the intelligence of the dancer, the actor, the athlete. And this is an intelligence that I found a lot of kids who get the ADHD label
Mhm,
tend to be very physical learners.
mhm.
So they walk into a classroom and they have to sit for several hours a day. That is agony for most of them, and of course they can't do it, so they fidget and they get out of their seat and they just manifest all the quote unquote warning signs of ADHD. And instead, they should be pacing their letters to learn about the letter shapes. They should be acting out history lessons or even acting out the word problems in mathematics. They should be building things, dioramas in social studies or in literature. So, this is an area, very few schools really emphasize this. And as a result, these kids end up, and I'm not at all a fan of the ADHD diagnosis. I wrote a book called The Myth of the ADHD Child. And there are a lot of reasons I feel this way, that it's a myth. But one of the main reasons is because we don't provide the necessary physical education. Even our PE programs are in bad shape. So, we don't provide the stimulus that a body smart kid really needs in order to activate his or her, areas of the brain that have to do with bodily kinesthetic intelligence, as Gardner calls it.
Exactly. And for those people out there that are listening and going, well, my child has a diagnosis of ADD or ADHD, and it's not a myth. I just want to say we're going to talk about this in the second segment in depth.
Yeah.
Dr. Armstrong is not saying it doesn't exist,
I'm
but
not saying the symptoms exist. I'm
right,
saying
right.
that the concept itself is faulty.
As a medical diagnosis, yes. And we're
Right.
going to talk about that in much more detail. But let's go ahead and finish
Sure.
talking about the overview of the intelligences, and then we'll take a break and we'll come back and talk about, so what does this mean and what do we do about it?
Okay. Sounds good. The next one is music smart, which is kind of self-explanatory. Kids that have, can sing on tune, that have a good sense of rhythm, that enjoy appreciating music, that could play a musical instrument perhaps, and, in other ways, just really enjoy the musical experience. And this is also an intelligence that hardly ever makes its way into the classroom. I remember I was teaching in a upstate New York classroom, demonstration teaching, and we were learning. We were studying a book by S.E. Hinton, and I can't remember the title, but at any rate, there was a scene in the story or in the novel where there was music, and I thought, well, let's amplify this. Let's see if anybody has any music on them. And I said, anybody got any music? And everybody reached into their bag and pulled out something. And the only big problem was half the class wanted heavy metal and half the class wanted rap. So, but there was intense involvement and energy in that. And that just shows the extent to which we starve our kids musically in school. Even the music programs are often first to be cut. And yet kids really need to learn musically. They should be, singing songs of historical periods to learn about them. They should be learning the relationship between musical intervals and ratios and fractions, for example. And so there's just so many ways to bring music in that there's no justification for keeping it out. The next one is people smart. And this is the ability to work well with people, one-on-one in small groups or large groups. It's a sense of empathy, being able to get in the mind of somebody else and know what they're thinking or feeling. It's the ability to, be a counselor or a therapist, the ability to be an organizer, a manager in a business. And this is a big one because, if you can't work well with people, there are a lot of jobs out there that will be difficult for you. And all too often it happens that someone works really well kind of, at a hands-on job in a factory, and then they get promoted to being manager. And all of a sudden they're required to do people smart skills that they're unprepared for. So we need to, this one we really need a lot of help with, because obviously our society has some difficulty with this. And yet we don't have any courses for people smart unless they're part of a prevention program in a school. Mm-hmm. So that's a really big one. And then another really big one is self-smart. Gardner calls this intrapersonal intelligence, which is the intelligence of knowing who you are. It's the intelligence of knowing what you're feeling inside and being able to express that. It's the intelligence of being able to set goals. It's the ability to be motivated and have a game plan as to how you're going to get to your goals. But it's also the ability, even if you fail, to draw up your goals and forge ahead. And there are a lot of people. It's interesting because you look at business, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are good at this, who have a vision, and then their company gets really successful and they're required to use a lot of people smart to manage all the people that have come on board, and they can't do it well. But in the classroom, these are the kids that are the social butterflies. They want to talk to people. They need peer instruction, teaching other kids. They need collaborative learning, cooperative learning. They need to evaluate each other's work, peer evaluation. And again, this is something that we're not giving them. We call collaboration cheating in some cases. Oh, you can't let them work with the other kids because they'll give each other the answers. That's a good thing. That's how the world works. People get ideas from other people, and then it goes back and forth. So we need to really emphasize that intelligence. And then
Exactly.
finally, there's nature smart, which is the naturalist. That's the one that Gardner added more recently. It's the ability to know what kind of a tree this leaf came from, or what kind of an animal made this animal track, or what these clouds portend as far as weather. And it's the ability. A lot of kids would rather learn outside. There's actually in Norway a school structure where they actually spend a day a week outside in a special, fortified shed or series of sheds. And I went out there once and it started raining, and I thought, oh, that's going to kill this lesson. And they just put on their wraps and they kept on working. There's a whole different attitude about nature in Norway. And so these kids, would rather be outside, or if they're inside, they'd rather be hanging next to the gerbil cage, or, the ant farm or whatever it is. And of course, this is how they should learn science, through observing, other organisms. They should be able to study math by making measurements and weights and so forth. And
Absolutely.
these are the kids that have empathy for nature. These are the earth angels that are concerned about what's happening to our climate and our whole world with the ecological disasters that are going on. So those are the 8 intelligences, and they really provide a broad-based way of accounting for kids' interests and their preferences and the ways in which, if they were given the chance, they would like to learn.
Absolutely. And to honor those, and as I've heard you say before, it's not how smart are you, but how are you smart? And so
Exactly.
now that we've had just an overview, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about, so how do we use those? How can we help children be the best they can be? How can we perhaps get away from some of these labels when we just can instead look at what do the kids need to learn the way they learn? And we're
Right.
going to go into much more detail about that when we come back. Thank you
Super.
so much.
Thanks.
Dr. Armstrong, in the first segment, you gave us a wonderful overview of what the multiple intelligences, or the 8 smarts, are. And what I'd like to do in this second segment is to talk about, so what do we do with that? What do we, how do we help parents and educators to help the children that they're working with? And it's not about just giving the musical child the musical activity.
Right.
Could you elaborate on that for us, please?
Sure. That is one of the common misunderstandings about how to use the model, because people will think, well, let's just label the kids, find out who the music smart kids are. They'll be in the music smart group, and we'll only give them music. And then we'll have the word smart kids over there and the logic smart kids over here and so forth. And that is a recipe for disaster. Actually, it's already what happens when a parent discovers they have a gymnast in the family, or a chess master, and they put all their emphasis on that one ability, and they leave the child open to underdevelopment in these other areas. And that's what I'm concerned about. We need to give our kids a balanced approach, and that includes exposure to all 8 intelligences. And so, I'm not saying that everything a teacher teaches should be taught in 8 ways. Oftentimes, I will demonstrate how that looks so they have a feel for it.
Right.
But general, I say, over the course of a week, as you're teaching, try to include activities that cover the 8 intelligences. So everyone has the chance to shine in an activity, and also so that kids have a chance to stretch and have some difficulties. The problem is when we only teach in one or two ways, it's always the same kids who are having the gifted experience. Yeah, this is great. I do well. And it's the other group that's always having the disability experience. And that's not fair. And,
No,
and I sort of humorously say we should spread the disability around. Every kid deserves to feel disabled sometime during the school day. And what I really mean is every kid deserves to feel gifted during the school day, and a
right,
lot of kids are shut out of that. So
right.
that's an important point to make.
I'm so glad that you said that. And let's talk a little bit about those labels that we know, are go flying around our schools. Whether you're in a private school, traditional school, whatever it is,
Right.
there are labels.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I know you believe, and I got this from you, and I've quoted you more times than I could even begin to count, is that one of the things that you say is that it's we have to be so careful because so many kids that have a label, whether it's ADD, ADHD, and you alluded to that a little bit already, anything, really what might be going on is they're not suffering from a a syndrome or something that we put a label on, but they may be suffering from dysteachia. Could
Right.
you elaborate on that for us,
Well,
please?
that's one thing that I've suggested. If kids aren't being taught the way in which they best learn,
Right.
that to me seems like almost malpractice. I just did a video on YouTube for my ADHD book, and I suggested that kids are really not being fed in the way that they need. That schools actually are brain hostile to most kids who are labeled ADHD. I should also mention ADHD really disturbs me as a label because it's got three negatives in it. Think about that. Attention is neutral, but then attention deficit's a negative, hyperactivity is a negative, and disorder is a negative. And I don't think parents really think this through when they ask themselves, do I really want my kid to have a label that has three negatives in it? Um, I've been really involved in neurodiversity. This is the idea that kids, who have ADHD labels are different. Certainly, they're different in the ways their brains develop and the way in which they're wired. But that's not a disorder. That's a difference. And we don't say that a calla lily has pedal deficit disorder, do we? No, we appreciate its uniqueness. And that's what we ought to do with each and every one of our kids, appreciate their uniqueness as learners.
Right. And this is not that was not a slam against any teacher or anybody that says I think your child has whatever, but I think when we really look at brain development and we really look at how children learn and we honor that, like I said, and you mentioned about the gifted programs. To my knowledge, it's still this way. The majority of quote unquote gifted programs in our country, I can't speak for the rest of the world, are really based on the word smart and the logic smart kind
Right,
of evaluation. And so what we're saying is, somebody who maybe can sit down and play a song, think through pictures as you talked about. We're saying that certain intelligences are more effective and better than others when they're just different. They may
right.
not be more effective.
In gifted and talented programs, IQ scores are often used as one of the most important ways of being eligible for those programs. And that's right away, a no-no as far as Dr. Gardner is concerned.
Right.
We need to give kids more ways of being admitted into these programs, or actually do something better, which is to take what we're doing in the gifted and talented programs and do them for all kids. Bring all the good stuff they get to do into the other classrooms. And so,
100%.
yeah, not have to segregate, why say we have the gifted child when every child has a gift, and they just open them at different times and so
I
forth.
love that. I've been saying that for 40 years and I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the quote is something the one I'm thinking of, I'm not sure if it's from you, is that all children are gifted and it's up to us to help them find their gifts.
Right, right,
And
exactly.
the multiple intelligences are really a way to do that. In the books that you've written, Dr. Armstrong, and as I said, I have just a few of them right here. I highly encourage parents. I think you have a newer version out than this.
No,
This
that's the new version.
Oh, this is the new version. I have
Yeah.
so many, I don't remember which is which, but I really encourage parents to, if you want to know more about the multiple intelligences, as a person observing your kids and how to nurture that in their own way is really one of my favorites. I know that this you have, I think you have an updated one of this 7 kinds of smart plus the
No,
two
that's the
kinds.
updated one.
Oh, okay. This is
Yeah.
the updated one too.
You're pretty
That
current
gives
with
you
these.
so just a deeper look at what Dr. Armstrong just talked about. And I'm going to come back to this one, but I really want to look at this because I know that there are people out there that are going to say, how could you say that? How could you say there's no such thing as ADD again? And that's not what you're saying. You're saying that the symptoms may be real, but we have to look at why. And I know
Why?
one of the things that you talk about now, maybe not so much in the books because it wasn't such an issue when you wrote them, but you talk about the effect of so much media and
Y-
screen time.
Yes.
And I've talked about this in other aspects with other shows. Could you please elaborate on that in terms of the
Sure.
connection with ADHD?
I think everybody would have to agree that our media has increased over the past 50 years, increased in quantity, increased in speed. If you watch a 1950s commercial, notice how slow and clunky it is. And now everything's zip, 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 zip. Well, this affects the brain. It actually stimulates the dopamine receptors in our brain, and creates a kind of a continual hunger for reward that ultimately becomes exhausting.
Mhm.
And I fear that we have kids who are genetically susceptible. Again, we're not talking about a disorder, but a difference, who, when plunged into the midst of like an average of 7 hours a day of media, not including the time they spend in school,
Right.
they develop symptoms of ADHD. I mean, there's studies coming out suggesting it. There's a book called Dopamine Nation saying how our dopamine is being inundated, and the, uh, an important point is that ADHD is seen to be related to the dopaminergic pathways that include the frontal lobes, where a lot of our executive functions are held, and executive functioning is one of the problematic areas in kids labeled ADHD. So I build a case. I actually just recorded a video. If you go to YouTube and type in Thomas Armstrong, you'll go to my playlists, and I have a playlist called The Myth of the ADD Child. It's going to be 12 videos, and right now I'm just finishing up number 6. And there's one on media that I recommend that you see.
They're excellent. I think I've seen up till 5. Um, and they're easy to understand. They're easy to listen to. If you're a person out there listening and you're thinking, I don't know anything about this, I have to start at, ground zero. This is the place to begin. And the other thing I would like to just throw out there that is my observation, and I'd love your thoughts about it, is because kids are on video games more than they were, or even just staring at a screen, watch, whatever they're watching, and they're not out interacting with their environment as much.
Right.
They talk about short content and long content, on social media, and I know I'm always told, oh, short content is better. People don't have the attention spans that they used to. I believe that we're creating people, not
Yes.
just children, who have some of this symptomology of ADD and ADHD because of
Right.
the environment we're creating.
Exactly. Our brains are being rewired
Yes.
by this media. I think CBS at one time tried an innovation. They wanted to give more depth to their political coverage. And so they started having 30-second sound bites. In other words, interviewing a politician for 30 seconds. That was more depth. And they had to give it up because the average viewer, and we're talking about the average neurotypical viewer, could not sustain their attention for that long. If that's true of the adults, what about the kids who are
Yeah.
spending even more time and whose brains are still in the process of developing? And what are we doing to their brains? And do we really want to focus on more drugs for these kids or less media? I mean, it seems to me less media doesn't have any side effects like more drugs do, and less media would allow these kids to get out and play. Play is a huge issue. Our kids don't play anymore. And when they play, they actually stimulate the frontal lobes. And we need
Absolutely.
and their executive functioning. So, that also is one of the reasons we have this upsurge in ADHD is the decline of play in our culture.
It's huge. And I just want to tell our viewers out there, and also to share with you, Dr. Armstrong, I don't even remember, like 6 weeks ago, I interviewed a woman by the name of Pam Lobley, and she is the author of the book, Why Can't We Just Play? And
Mm,
her entire book and the entire program that we did is about that. And yes, it connects to ADD and ADHD. And so this is an enormous umbrella, if you will.
yes,
And in order to help our children be the best they can be and to help them understand how they best learn, it's not just a one situation. It's looking at all of this. And I
right.
really encourage you, um to all those parents out there, take a look at Dr. Armstrong's videos. They're anywhere between, I think, 3 and 12 minutes. They're very short. Look at some of the books that we did. And speaking of parents, when we come back from our break, we have some questions for you from our viewers. We'll be right back.
Sounds good.
In my social media and through my newsletters, I always ask my viewers, what is it that you would like to know more about? And in keeping with the navigation theme of parenting GPS, I like to call this your parenting destination. And Dr. Armstrong, we have two questions for you today. And the first one is from Eleanor from Lafayette, Louisiana. And Eleanor asks, how can I begin to explore how my child learns with my child so that they have a deeper understanding of their own learning style?
Very good question. Yes. Um, the, I think the best way to begin is to observe your child and notice what really fills them with excitement and interest. What do they gravitate towards? Assuming that there are materials around the house that represent most of the eight intelligences, do you find them playing music? Even if they're very young, do they go to the kitchen and bang on the pots and pans? You know, that may be a disturbance to some people, but to other people, it may be a burgeoning intelligence. And so observe them and notice what they do and what intelligence or intelligences they seem to involve. And then get involved with your child. As a family, I always recommend that families spend time with each of the eight intelligences, playing logic games together, like Monopoly, playing music together, um, putting on skits for the body smart, or playing sports together, going out into nature, having hikes together, and noticing what living forms are there, and asking questions and so forth. Reading together, very important, always. And let's see, which ones did I leave out? Picture smart, going to movies together, going to museums together. I mean, there are places that you can go out and take field trips to where each of the intelligences is honored. So spend time, if you can, again, over the course of a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, make sure that you spend some time interacting or with your child with elements of each of the eight intelligences. And you'll be, this is good for a variety of reasons. First, it helps kids deal with their challenges, but it also helps you discover intelligences that may not show themselves yet. They may just,
Right.
like, I had no idea my child could draw until we had this family get together draw-a-thon, and all of a sudden, I realized what a gift. The funny thing is, my mother, who passed away at the age of 99 a couple of years ago, when she was in her 80s, took up drawing. And I was flabbergasted because she was able to draw these portraits of us that looked like we looked. And I thought, she's just discovering her intelligence in her 80s. Well, we ought to start sooner with our kids so they
Yes.
can enjoy that experience more often.
But it's nice to know it's never too late.
It's never too
Um,
late.
and
Exactly.
I want to also elaborate on what you said and share with our viewers that these two books that I talked about that you wrote also give lots of examples about to increase activities within this intelligence or that intelligence. Here's some things that you can do. So parents don't have to sit around and think about, okay, what should I do? What should I do? It's
Exactly.
all right there.
Right.
And so that's wonderful information. And the second question that we have is from Tony in Surprise, Arizona, not too far from me. And Tony would like to know, what is the best way for my child to have a better understanding of how he or she learns best? And we kind of talked
Sure.
about that a little bit, but I know you have some resources.
Right. I've actually written a couple of books for kids. For older kids between the ages of 9 and say 16, I wrote a book called You're Smarter Than You Think, A Kid's Guide to Multiple Intelligences,
And here it is
published by
right
Free
here.
Press. Yep. Get a copy of that. And there's all kinds of information for kids to learn about how they learn best in the 8 ways. And then I also wrote a book more recently for younger kids, 3 to 6, let's say. It's a picture book, it's a board book called Smarts, Everybody's Got Them, published by the same publisher, Free Spirit Press. And these two books can really, start the process of kids getting in tune with the idea that everybody's smart. I mean, they should get that message early on. Kids acquire these lessons from school. Well, I guess I didn't do well on this test, so I must be dumb. You know, and or somebody calls him on the playground, oh, you dumbbell or something like that, and kids take it to heart.
Yeah.
And because they don't have the defenses that adults have to say, that guy's a jerk, I'm not going to believe him. So kids really suffer because of this, and we should, right at the beginning of their lives practically, let them know that everybody's smart, everybody can find their smart, everybody can find a smart that will help them in life, and that will help them find a job, because there are all sorts of jobs out there that use all the different intelligences. So if we get kids thinking early on about their gifts, by the time they graduate from high school or college, they're going to have a pretty good idea of what kind of career will be most successful and enjoyable for them.
Absolutely. And one last thing before I ask you to share with everyone where they can find all of your work. I want to just share with you that there was a school I worked with years and years ago. It was called the Multiple Intelligences School. And because they evaluated the children in ways that weren't only logical, mathematical, or verbal linguistic, or word smart, number smart, do you know that they had like 3 kids that qualified for special education services? And that's
Yes,
the gift.
that should tell you something right there. And there have been
Exactly.
a number of other studies that have come to the same result. But that's a whole nother kettle of fish to
We'll
talk
have to
about
have you back for
assessment.
another show.
Yeah.
So we're almost out of time, Dr. Armstrong. You are the world expert with knowing how to take all this information and what to do with it. And once again, I am so honored to have you here and have this opportunity. I'd like to ask you now to please share with our viewers, where can they find what is your website, what is your social media,
Sure.
and you have a novel out too.
Yeah, let me talk about that. I almost forgot. First of all, my website is www.institute, the number 4, learning.com. So it's institute, number 4, learning.com. And if you go to my website, you can find all my books and all the links to Amazon. You can actually find all these YouTube videos that I've been talking about, because I create a blog around them. And you can also, read hundreds of blog posts that I've created over the years, many, if not most of them, on multiple intelligences. So you get a lot of direction. Now, Kari asked me about my novel. I just wrote my 20th book. It's a novel called Childless. And it's really kind of on the same theme. It's about a childless child psychologist who tries to foil a US government plot to have childhood diagnosed as a medical disorder and removed from the human genome. So it's kind of a dystopian novel. It's an 18 plus novel. It has some expletives in it and so forth. But it's a way for me to say in fiction some of the things that I haven't been able to say in nonfiction about the danger of our children disappearing, the childlike nature going away, and how that could be devastating for our culture.
It is devastating, and I look forward to reading that. So parents, grandparents, educators, whoever you are, please take this information to heart. And the wheel, I'm going to show it right now, the multiple intelligences wheel. If you would like a copy of that, I'm going to put that on my website at karikling.com. There's a blue bar on the top, and it's not up there right now. I'm recording this before it's being seen, but I'm going to have my assistant put it there for me. And if you would like to have a copy of that, this is a great tool to be able to, copy it, put it in multiple places in your house. And every time you
Yes.
have an activity as a family, you can look at it and say to your child, which intelligences did we just use to do this? And which ones could we use that we didn't use that would be helpful? And so I want
Yeah.
everybody to have this information. And once again, Dr. Armstrong, thank you so much. And it is truly my honor. And I'd like to close the show today with a quote from you. And you said, when we allow children and teens to develop according to their natural rhythms and learn in their own unique way, we make it possible for them to achieve a sense of meaning in their lives and enable them to share their remarkable gifts with the broader culture, thus making the world a better place in which to live. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Kari. It's a pleasure to be on.
My pleasure.